Hi, this is Sean Hafer, and in this video we are going to be looking at Adobe Audition and getting an introduction to some basic function and ways we can clean up, record audio, edit audio, etc. So first off, we'll take a look at the interface here. We can see we've got a few tabs up here. We've got waveform and multitrack. Waveform is where we will go in and do the more detailed editing of a waveform, of a sound. We're kind of working with one sound at a time in the waveform editor. And multitrack is where we can have multiple tracks of audio that we can individually mix and combine and add effects, etc., to create a composition of various music tracks, vocals, audio, narration, sound effects, whatever you need to do. Down here we'll have our file manager. Like this will be basically our sort of where all of our assets that we import will be. This is our main editor window. Over here we've got the essential sound panel. That'll come into play when we're in our multi-track mode. Down here's a media browser where we can browse. If you know exactly where all of your files are, you can get to that. The effects rack is this tab, and that basically will let us go through and add in different effects such as reverbs, delays, EQs, compressors, limiters, all those kind of things. And we can bring those in and add those, and they won't immediately change the sound. So you can keep adjusting them on the fly until you get what you want. And then you can kind of lock those in or render those onto the audio file. Then we've got our markers, and then we've got a properties panel. So I'll go back to the media browser here. Down here we'll have our history, and then we also have a video panel, which we'll look at also later on. Down at the bottom here, we've got our levels. This will be our audio levels. Now, when you're recording, you really want to somewhere go between like -12 and say -6 as a good safe space to have your recording levels. When you're mixing, you never want to go above 0. If you stick around -3, that'll be pretty good for, as if -3 is your peak, you're pretty good for not being too loud or too soft when someone listens to your piece of audio. And then down here's some sort of information on what we have selected. If you want to record into Adobe Audition, we can come up here to the waveform, and if we click that, it'll say, here's a new audio file. I'm going to call this recording 1. And we've got our sample rate, which is 48,000 or 48K kilohertz. Our channels are mono. We could also record stereo if you've got a stereo microphone, or surround sound if you've got that kind of setup. But we'll go with mono. And bit depth is 32 float. Now, when we record, a lot of times 24 is a great bit depth to go for. 32-bit is kind of like a raw image where you've got a lot more range in the loudest louds and the softest softs. So 32 float is great to record into. And then when we export out of Audition, we can save it down to a 16-bit. All right, so I'm going to hit OK. And now you can see everything sort of changes a little bit. Here's our first recording 1. Over here, we've got where our audio file will show up. Down here, we've got a little loop playback. We've got this little window that we can move around, which just has our gain or our amplitude. And I could come in and sort of start to record. But if we look at my levels right now, I'm not seeing anything. If I hit record, I would start seeing it and it would start recording. But what I want to do here is right-click on my levels and hit meter input signal. And the shortcut is Alt or Option plus I. So I'll do that. Now we can see my vocal coming in. I said somewhere between -12, -6. But if we look at the reason for that is if you're interviewing someone, or maybe it's a podcast, if you laugh or make a ha-ha, you can see I just clipped there, right? And that distortion is going to be, it's really unflattering. It sounds bad. So you want to avoid that at all costs. So I can click that to clear that out. That'll just let you know if during the entire time you're recording, you peak. So again, if I do ha-ha, peak too close, there we go, sorry for that loudness. That'll stay there to let you know you got too loud. So I'm going to go ahead and just click it to clear it. And then what we can do now is just hit our record. Okay, this is a recording right into Audition from my microphone that I'm using. And sorry about the noise. Someone is replacing light bulbs outside of my office, and there's no way around it. We've got my recording, and we can kind of hit spacebar to play that back, or hit the play button here. Okay, this is a recording right into Audition from my microphone that I'm using. Okay, so we can hear that beep in there. Maybe actually we could use this and try and clean this audio up in a minute. So we'll try that maybe a little later. So we can see we've got that. Now, if we look at what we've got here, I don't need this beginning part. And there's a little bit of noise we can hear in the beginning. Okay, this is a recording right into Audition from my microphone. It's not too bad. So what I could do first off, if you want to sort of get rid of some noise, one way we can do this is we can just click and highlight a little section of the noise. So if that's our noise right there, and I can just play that to hear if we got something. Well, that's really just my breath, so I think we're probably okay. Let's check this one. So I'm going to hit stop, and I'm just going to highlight this first part and go ahead and hit backspace or delete. And let's play. Okay, this is a recording right into Audition from my microphone that I'm using. And here, maybe this pause is fine, but I've got a little bit of breath again, but I kind of don't mind the pause too much. So I can just come up here and bring my gain down a little on that portion. So let's see how that now sounds. Right into Audition from my microphone that I'm using. All right, and let's go. Maybe I do want to give a little more or less space there. So let's delete that, see how that feels. And what you're going for Audition from my microphone. And what we're trying to do is we want to edit down to get that conversational feel, right? You want it to flow. Okay, this is a recording right into Audition from my microphone that I'm using. Okay, so, and again, we've got the sound at the end. We'll just leave this for now, but that's just the basics of recording into Adobe Audition. We can see up here, there's our recording. Now, if we wanted to save this out, we could come up, make sure we've got it selected, and we could just go to File, Save As, and then we could save it whatever we want to. So recording1.wave. If I wanted to make this an MP3, we could come down here, hit MP3. Now, MP3 is a compressed version. It's kind of like a JPEG versus a Photoshop document. And if we do this, it's going to warn us when we're ready. So also I'm going to pick where I'm going to save it. I'm going to just save it to I'm going to put it in the same folder here, audio intro files. I'll go ahead and save that. It's going to give me a little warning. Hey, that's being saved to a compressed, lossy format. I'm fine. Hit yes. And now we've got that saved over here. Recording 1 MP3. Okay, this is a recording right, and there we go. So that's kind of recording in basically into Adobe Audition. Now I want to import some other files. We can do a couple things. We can double click up here in the viewer. We can do a Command I or Control I, or under File, do Import. We can see Import File, Control I here. You can also drag your files from a folder. So if I came over here and selected all of these, and I drag them in, we can see now all of those are available for us to work with. Now, if you've got one over here that you've imported, you can just double click it. So if I double click this VOSPH intro, head back to the beginning here and hit spacebar. This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files. Okay, so what we want to do is sort of edit this up a little. Now, first off, I could go ahead and hit my amplitude adjustment here to bring it up a little louder. Now, what we can see, though, is happening is as I bring that up, we're also getting the noise to come up a little. So let's see what that's doing. This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files. Okay, so I've got it up where I'm hitting right about -3 at my loudest bits. So what I'm going to do is let's start editing this real quick. But first, let's get rid of this noise. So I'm going to go ahead and we can hear that hum in the background. That's probably some kind of fan or something in the background. And I'm going to go ahead and select that bit of just noise. And if I hit play, I can hear it, right? And now what I want to do is go up to my effects, come down here to noise reduction and restoration, and I'm going to go ahead and do my noise reduction. Now, what it's going to do is give us some instructions here. It says, hey, you haven't picked a noise print. So what a noise print is, it's a sample of the noise that you want to grab, and then Audition will use that to try and take that out of the entire clip. So it says, select an area of the waveform that contains noise. We already did that right here. Press the Capture Noise Print button. That's here, right here. Boom. Now we've got the noise print captured. And then we can come in here, and then it says, select the entire file. So if we do that, we select the entire file. I'm going to come up here to default just to clear it out so we can see what happens. And now if I play,
this is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a
getting
great
rid of it a little bit
for editing single files
but I can bring
or
this
creating
up.
multi-track files.
So let me go back to the beginning here. See if this sounds any better. There we go. We can barely hear any noise.
This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files.
And then this is how much we're reducing it by. So I'm going to really crank it down and see if that gets us there. So one last listen.
This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files.
Okay, and so that did an okay job. Now what we want to do is sort of edit this down. So I'm going to go ahead and just select this, hit delete. We don't need any of this at the end, so we can hit delete. Now this very first syllable I kind of hit here, if I hit this, it's a little high, a little peaky. So I'm just going to bring that down a little. So it just feels a little softer.
This is a sample wave.
Feels a little better. It's right in there. So let's hear the rest of it.
Form for use in Adobe Audition.
So I've got my little breath there, right? So maybe we want to get rid of that and take a little of that space out. Let's see how that feels.
Use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for...
So there's a little pause. So I want to go and hit here. Now, if I wanted to zoom in, I could use my mouse wheel. We also have our zoom left and right down here. And in Audition, it's the equal sign or the minus sign to zoom in and out. So you can do that as well. But I'll probably just use my scroll wheel most of the time. So you can zoom in a little more to see the actual time.
The great program.
So maybe we want great and then right into the P.
Is a great program for...
There we go. That feels good. Zoom back out a little.
For editing single files.
Okay, there's again that breath. Delete that.
Program for editing single files or creating multi...
And I think I can take a little more out of that. Let's go in a little bit more so I can really see. Let's try that.
This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files.
Great. So that sounds pretty good. So now what we could do, once we get that flowing the way we want it to flow, we can think about sweetening it up a little or making it sound a little better. One way we could do this, if we go over to the effects rack here, we have all our effects up here that we can grab. And we can come in and add some equalization or some modulation or even some special effects like a reverb or an echo. So let's say if I went in here and did a little echo and pulled down my thing here and said, let's do spooky and hit apply or just hit play for your here.
This is a sample waveform for use in
Right, so there we go. But I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm not going to apply it. And we can add all those over here as well, like I said earlier, that then we don't have to change our waveform until the very end. You could add all of these individually by clicking on these arrows and adding stuff, but there's also a lot of nice presets in here. So if I come in here, you can see there's all kinds of things we could do. And what I'm going to look at is podcast voice. And now you can see it added 5 different effects here. And if you double click on one, you will see the settings for that. So if we come down here to the parametric EQ, you can see how that's EQing my voice, dropping certain frequency bands and boosting. So a little notch there and then boosting here at the high end. And let's hear what that sounds like with that all on.
Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files.
So you can see this is
This
bringing
is a
us
sample waveform
right
for
up
use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition
almost
is a
zero.
great program for editing single files.
It's got a little too much in the high end for me. I'm hearing a little too much of this in my S's. So what I'm going to do is go back to this EQ, and over here I'm going to just grab that high and bring it down a little and see if that helps.
Or creating multi-track files. This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files. This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files.
Okay, so I will just leave that.
This is a sample.
Now, if I want to save this into it, if I want to apply all of these differences, what I want to do is hit apply. And then now you can see our waveform changed. It's built in.
This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe.
And then I could just save it out from here if I needed to. All right, so that's kind of the basics of editing and doing a little bit of EQing and some different things with the effects rack. So let's look at some other options, such as what if we have a sound that happens that we can't, we don't want in here. So we had that beep. So let's see if we can mess with that a little. Now, I saved it as an MP3, so it might be a little hard to hear, but let's try it out anyway. So I'm going to double click this and let's see what we've got. Okay, this is a recording right into Audition from my microphone that I'm using. Okay, so we hear that out in the outside of my office. We can hear that echoey beep of that scissor lift, right? When we're looking at the general waveform editor, all we're seeing here is amplitude, right? How loud is this file? Now, if we go up here and click on this first little icon, show spectral frequency display, we can see now our frequencies up the right side here. And now we can see where this beep, beep, beep lies, right? So it's right in here. If we come up to this sort of paintbrush selection tool, and right next to that, we've got our spot healing brush, just like Photoshop. And so I could come down here. Now, if we listen, we can see when it gets here, okay, this is a recording right into Audition from my microphone that I'm using, right? So that's it right through there. And so what I'm going to do is use my bracket keys to bring that a little down. And let's try and just paint this out. Okay, let's see if that helped. Okay, this is a recording right into Audition from my microphone that I'm using. Okay, this is a recording right into Audition from my microphone that I'm using. Okay, so let's see if we bring that a little bigger. Now again, this was a compressed file, so it might be really hard. Let me just kind of take that all the way through. I don't think we're going to get it on this one. Microphone that I'm using. Okay, this is a recording right into Audition from my microphone that I'm using. So it is better. Again, sometimes these really are just hard to get out. Usually if that would happen, you would want to just re-record it without the noise happening in the background. So but if this was in a multi-track with maybe some music underneath, you might not even notice it. If it's something that it's a one-time, once in a lifetime recording and you can't get it re-recorded, then you can do your best to try and clean it up. But the best thing to do is just really go ahead and get it and re-record it so it's clean. Now, I can show you another example of how this might work. If we go to voice alarm, this is one where sometimes you may be recording and unexpectedly you get a sound that you did not expect to be in your recording. Okay, so there's a couple things with this one. So you can see here, I recorded this probably like on a Zoom recorder into one channel of it. So it recorded on just the left channel of a stereo recording. If I would have recorded in mono, it would have just been one waveform. If I was, or if I had another mic plugged into the other side, we would have two different waveforms for which mic was on each channel. If I'm working with this, I don't want this not coming out of my right headphone. So I want to come up here and right-click on my voice alarm up in my files window and just come down here to extract channels to mono files. And if I click that, you can see we get two new files. We get voice alarm left, which is our, sometimes you may be, and then we get voice alarm right, which is empty. So on voice alarm right, that was my old right channel. I can just delete that. And on voice alarm left now, I've got just a mono. It comes out of both of my headphones on my left and right equally, and that's where we're at. So here we've got that recording, and unexpectedly, you get a sound that you did not expect to be in your recording. Okay, so this one, I recorded it, had a little timer going off. It's similar to the last one, but this has not been compressed down to an MP3 yet. So this was still a wave, so there's a lot more information in there. An MP3 basically looks at your file, thinks what frequencies you're not going to miss, what we would perceive as not noticing if they're gone, and deletes those frequencies to make a smaller file size. So that could be one of the reasons we couldn't clean it up as well. But this one, since it's still a wave, there's a little more information. So if I go back up to my spot healing brush here, and let's try, we can see it's these right here. So where's our first one? And unexpectedly, so right there. Now you can also see that it's separated into these different harmonics, right? So we've got one around 2K, then almost an octave up, 4K, 6K. So we can see that we're getting all those frequencies kind of together to make this one sound. So in the previous one, that was almost like a pure tone from that lift outside that was beeping. This one's got a little more nuance to its sound. So we have to hit all of these. So if I come in here, and I'm going to just bring it down a little bit. We'll go 1, 2. Now you could hit each little dot separately if you want to take the time. I'm going to kind of just not try to do that. And we can go over to this next one. Now we can see there's some here. And so I'm assuming there's some right here. We know there's going to be some here. And a couple up here. I guess we'll get this one up here too, just in case. Come over to this side. 1. Just paying them out. And I'm doing this pretty fast. You could take more time when you're doing it. This next one here. I'll just go ahead and come through all of these. And our last little one's up here. And then these we can just kind of see if we can take those out. All right, so let's see if that helped. Oh, here's a couple too. All right, let's see what happens here. So let's play it back. Sometimes you may be recording and unexpectedly you get a sound that you did not expect to be in your recording. So not too bad. This one down here, we're still getting a little bit. I can hear it. You get a sound that you did not expect to be in your recording. Unexpectedly, you get a sound that you did not expect to be in your recording. Sometimes you may be recording and unexpectedly you get a sound that again, it's not perfect. If I took some time maybe with the initial file, we could get that to look a little nicer. But, it's a much better. So again, if there was some music underneath, that would probably cover up that. It's not as loud as it was when we first opened that up. So we can kind of get rid of that. So I'm going to go back to my waveform view real quick, turn that off. And we can you did not expect to be in your recording. And here we could even take that part that we can kind of hear in the middle and just bring that down a little bit. And unexpectedly, you get a sound that you did not expect to be in your Okay, so we'll keep moving on here. So we've got our alarm, and now we'll jump over into our multi-track view. So if we click on this, it's going to ask us to sort of save a new multi-track session. So I'll call this multitask, and we'll save it. I'm going to save it in that same folder. So I'm going to go back to my downloads and into those files and select it. Cool. So it's got a template here, and you could say none or podcasts or some different things. I'm going to go ahead with none here right there now and just hit OK. So you can see what happens is it opens up. This is probably a little more familiar if you've ever used any kind of NLE or video editor, Premiere, Resolve, iMovie, right? Any of these things. We've got multiple tracks. And then at the bottom, we've got our mix output. So our mix output is once we set all of our levels and get everything laid out where we want it on these different tracks, this is our general amplitude for the entire mix. So if I came up here and went to track 1, we can kind of see, let's grab VOSPH intro. So we've already edited this, but I'm going to go ahead and put it right on there. So we can hit play.
This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great...
Okay, so we've got that. Now let's grab this music clover and let's drag that down here. And that was a different frequency. It was probably at 44.1. Yep, there we can see, which is what CD quality is, or most streaming services stream at 44.1. And this is set at 48, so it just had to convert it before we could start working with it. So let's see how this goes.
This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition.
All right, so we've got that happening. I'm going to move this down just a little bit more. So we've got multiple tracks and we want to put music into maybe a voiceover or it's the explainer video, whatever's happening. You usually want to have your music drop down when the person's talking, and that's called ducking. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to sort of zoom in a little bit. So let me see if I can come in here and just zoom in a little so we can see this better. And let's see how the volume sounds first. And I'm going to go ahead, and what I can do is if I come up right to the edge here, you can see I get that little red bracket with an arrow, which showing I can kind of either shrink or extend this clip. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to move it back to the edge there. So we get a little quicker start.
This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is bring that down. Now this little level right here, so we've got our gain over here and our pan between left and right, but this little line right here is our volume. Now if you want, you could kind of just grab that and bring it up. You can see I'm going up about 40
Adobe Audition. Adobe
Audition too loud. But I can also bring it down.
A great program for editing single,
right, and have that sort of be quieter. Now I'm going to go up to where it was at 0, and before I start talking, so maybe we're at about right here, I'm going to come in here and hover over until it turns into the arrow with a plus. And then I'm going to click to create a keyframe. I'm going to move forward a little bit and click again to create a second. And now I'm just going to drag that volume keyframe down. Maybe let's try 17 dB or so, and let's see how that sounds.
This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. We
might bring it up a little bit. So this is where you can adjust and figure out what
Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files. For use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program
so maybe about
for editing
-8.
single
And then we do the same thing. We get to the end.
files or creating multi-track
So right as I'm
files.
wrapping up, go ahead, find that plus again, and then we can bring it back up, and it'll snap to where your previous one is. So right there, I'm at 0 dB again, and then we can just kind of let that go. Then maybe we give it a few beats, and then we'll kind of fade this out. Now, if you remember, if you've done it in Audition or in other things, you might, we could just set another keyframe here and bring it out, but Audition has a nice little cross dissolve, cross fade feature. So if I go ahead, I just zoom this out up here so that I could come in, and I'm going to grab this end and go right pretty close, right? So maybe somewhere around there. And let's zoom it back out by coming up to our preview range. All right. So we're playing
Editing single files or creating multi-track files.
and maybe about there. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that down to maybe there. And then I'm going to click on this little icon up here, and this is our fade out. And you can see if you go down, you can change your curve. So up and down, that would be a pretty rapid fade out. This is just a nice straight linear fade, but I'm going to do a kind of maybe something around here and see how that feels.
Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files.
Okay, so we got a nice little fade out. Just like if you are editing motion, right? If you've got something coming to a stop, you want to give it an easy ease at least, right? In After Effects, you want to have that ease in, ease out. This is basically the same thing for audio, right? So we can use these eases, and you can, if you wanted it to fade up, we could do the same thing here. Give it a little fade up at the beginning, right? So depending on what you're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that back down though. Boop. All right, so once we have something like this, we could come in and we want to mix this down, right? Or bring this down to something editable. Now, if I click, I haven't showed you this little thing, but if I click on the mixer, we can see this is more like a more normal mixing board. If I hit
This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe
I might want
Audition.
to bring this down
Adobe
a little.
Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files.
And then you can put different effects on different channels here, just like on our little effects rack. It's just a little smaller version of that. You can see it's the same amount.
Waveform.
This is another view. Sometimes people really enjoy this. Sometimes you can have a MIDI controller that has the mixer faders on it and the knobs that you can then have that tactile experience. So you can kind of control things with MIDI even inside here. So I'm going to come back in here. I like what I've got here, and I'm going to go up to multi-track, mix down session to new file, and I want to do the entire session. And now we get a new WAV file over here, multitest mixdown. And it's a little quiet,
is a sample waveform
so I could bring
for
the
use
whole
in
thing up a
Adobe
little.
Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files or creating multi-track files.
So we've got that, but it still isn't saved yet. So this is where, with this selected, I'd go up to File. I'd probably want to save it first as a wave, right? So it's nice and clean. And I could just say, okay, that sounds great. But then I might want to do a file save as and get my MP3 version that I'm going to maybe put on the web. So I could pull down here, do an MP3, and hit OK. All right, so that's our mix down. Now, one other thing I'm going to show how to do in here is we're going to sync some audio to video in just a second. But let's jump back to the multi-track. Actually, I'm going to do a new one. Or we don't need to do a new one. But what I'll do is I'm going to come in here. I'm going to delete my Clover here, and I'm going to bring in a new one. And we're going to look at this using our Essential Sound Panel clips. So if we come in here and we take this what I've got up here, which is my voiceover, I can tag that as dialogue. Now you can see it gives us a whole bunch of effects or things that we can do to adjust our voice, kind of things that we could put over here in our effects rack, but this gives us sort of the top ones that people would use. Now again, we've got some default presets, so I could come up here and do a podcast voice and see what that does for us.
For use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single files.
And that's fine. We'll just leave that on there for now. Now, the more important thing of that is, let's mute this track, and that's this button up here. We've got the M. And if I mute it,
Adobe Audition is
right? If you hit the S, that's solo.
Or creating
that'll mute everything else. And if you hit R, that's your record. So if we stop here, now you can see I'm getting my levels, and if I hit record, I could record right into this track. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and mute my vocals. Okay, so what we're going to do here, which really is interesting and cool about Audition, is if we take and select our music, right? And I come over here and I tag that as music. We've got some different things. Now it's got auto ducking, so if I unmute my audio and I take this and I come over and turn on ducking, you can see it draws right away our little amount. So if I come back and hit play.
This is a sample waveform for use in Adobe Audition. Adobe Audition is a great program for editing single
and you can bring
or creating multi-track
it up a little
files.
if you don't want it to drop that much, right? So auto ducking, super cool. You can do that. I just turned it off. Another really nice thing you can do here is if we come up to duration, we can click on this, turn that on, and you can see there's a stretch, so you could stretch it or shrink it to certain times. But what's really interesting is this remix. So say we needed 30 seconds of audio. Now, sometimes what you would do is you might cut out a beat, go towards the end where you get the nice fade out of the music or something. Again, cut out another beat. Most likely, you're sticking to, if it's 4/4, you want to maybe cut on the 1 so that, it works together well. And then try and get it as close as you can to 30 seconds, right? So that could be one thing you could do. What's cool about this is we can let this sort of machine learning do this. And we can say our target here, let's do 30 seconds. I'll hit enter. It's going to think for a second. Now you can see these are all the little edits it's made. So if I come back here, and we'll just mute this so we can just hear the music. And on the 1. So it's saying it got it down to 34,350. In reality, we're down at about, let's hit stop and go back here. We're at probably a little before 30. So we could do some things to sort of adjust this if we needed to. But yeah, it's a really cool effect. If you do this favor shorter segments, you can see it gets even a little more complex in its edit. So we come back. Okay, so again, very similar. Really cool feature to be able to use if you need to shorten some audio to a specific time. So it'll get you really close, save you a good amount, and it does a pretty good job. All right, so I think the last thing we're going to do is look at our lining up video. So here's where I will go in and do a new multi-track. So File, New Multi-Track Session, and we'll call this Video Sync. And that's all fine. Hit OK. So I've got some video up here of, where is it at? SoundSync MP4. So I'm going to drag that over here. And now we can see I've got this video down here of, now what I did here is recorded on a little Zoom H1 small recorder with a cheap, like $18 Amazon lavalier mic, just plugged into the mic input. And so off the DSLR, this is the audio we got. Super noisy. Okay, this very strangely lit. So you can hear the room has a lot of reverb in it, right? It's got a lot of sort of echo, bounce. It's, you know, an apartment somewhere. It's not a great spot. So what I'm going to do, I also recorded, if we come up here to SoundSync 01 Wave, and I'm going to mute this one up here, and let's listen to this one. This one I record. This is the recording in the H1N. Or not the H1N, just the H1. Okay, this very strangely lit scene is to demonstrate off-camera versus... Okay, so much cleaner, not as much of the HVAC noise, a little bit better all the way around. So what we can do is if we... Now, in Adobe Premiere and some other programs, you could just select these two and there would be a sync feature that would sync the audio. Here I'm just going to do it like they did in the old days and line it up visually. Select that clip. We got to first shrink it down a little. Go to my bracket. There we go. My edit tool. I'm just looking for the peak of the snap. And line up the peak of the snap. And this should get it to us. So now I'm going to keep that muted and let's see how it goes. Okay, this very strangely lit scene is... And there we go. We could do a little bit of editing. We could do a little cleanup if we needed to.
Miking.
But that
so
gives us
a separate track with the Zoom
a nice sync and just shows the difference of even just using a small, you know, just a cheap lavalier mic can still give you so much better quality audio than something just off your DSLR. So, you know, that audio difference is huge. It makes people appreciate the video or the animation a lot better. So I hope this little quick intro to Adobe Audition helped you out. And thanks for watching.